Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Welcome to my classroom. We're here in Garden Grove, and my name is Eric Finizzi. I'm an ELD and ERWC teacher of 18 years now? Well, 13 years with ERWC. So why are we here? Well, I wanted to share with you my UDL journey through my ERWC class. As I've worked with this curriculum in the high school classroom, I have seen the benefits, seen its capacity to be transformative for students. And yet, my experience has also taught me that no matter how amazing the content of the class that I teach, it won't matter unless it's accessible for all students. So what do I mean by that? Well, first of all, I need to acknowledge the fact that the young people who occupy these seats here for a brief stint of time, they're not robots. I may ask for compliance from them, and with enough motivation, I can get students to follow my program. There may be some degree of that in any compulsory situation. I get that. But still, I have to recognize that there are barriers in place. Some of the result of my teaching and my classroom environment, some due to outside circumstances, but all of which could be preventing students, learners from achieving success. So, if you'll allow me, before I walk you through our UDL-ified Brave New World module, I'd like to provide some context. Really, it's important to begin with a little background. The students I teach, my ERWC community of practice, the people who I collaborate with day to day with ERWC, my approach to reading and evaluation. It all matters. Let me preface by saying that I am not here to say that this is the way to bring UDL into the classroom. No. This is one way, and it's our UDL journey here at Bolsa Grande High School. And I hope it can inform your practice as you pursue your journey. I do believe that humans, even teachers, need examples. And let this be one of many possible examples of UDL in the ERWC classroom. So sit back, and thanks for being here.
One of the first things we consider at the start of the year is some data, our school demographics. We look to see if there are any changes to the numbers from previous years. This allows us to consider some possible trends and really help us to reconsider our assumptions about the student population. In a way, this is calibrating. We consider our students' ethnicities and socioeconomic level. We also look at the attendance rates, the percentage of English learners, the percentage of students with special needs receiving services. Not only is this information good to know as teachers for the school in which we serve, it also directly impacts our ERWC classrooms. We've made it our mission to examine the potential barriers that might be preventing access to the class itself. We have been working to ensure our ERWC classes are accessible for seniors, regardless of grade point average, and with the advisement of the SPED and ELD departments, accessible to students with special needs and English learners at bridging proficiency level. We aim to make it the least restrictive classroom environment for our students. Taking a look at the data can really put it into perspective who we are actually serving at the school and where we're not meeting the mark. So we find that this is a necessary step in the process of making our ERWC classrooms more accessible. I'm fortunate to work with a collaborative-minded team at my site. Admittedly, if this wasn't the case, I think I would seek out a team in some other form. Being at the same school arguably is the strongest commonality. But the community of ERWC teachers in the district is my second closest bet. Finding that commonality is the key. We are all busy teachers, but collaboration is valuable in this work, and I'd argue critical in approaching one's teaching with a UDL mindset. So what do we offer each other? Well, at Bolsa, we 4 teachers come together and we offer our own set of strengths as educators and even backgrounds as learners. This helps in noticing gaps in our curriculum, in bringing creativity and variability to the designing. Probably the greatest benefit for us with our busy lives is the fact that we share the load. Collaborating on the design of daily lessons, week plans, the adjustment of formative and culminating assessments, we can lean on each other and do not feel the weight of designing it all on our own. And that, to me, seems the greatest challenge in following through with a UDL approach. The feeling that so much is needed to be considered. Anticipating the barriers to learning and designing for all learners. That's a lot. It helps so much to know that there is a team in place to design a shared curriculum.
There's another benefit though. As individual teachers, we receive feedback from the students in our own classrooms. And then from that group, it is usually the students who are more willing to speak out and tell us when something is working or not in our classrooms. What may more often occur though, when seeking feedback from students, is reluctance from them to do so. There may be students who might share similar needs as learners in some of our other classes, but they're unwilling to voice that to their teacher. So as collaborators, we can share the feedback we receive individually from our students to inform our team's design decisions moving forward. These insights broaden the net of accessibility in all of our ERWC classrooms. Look, I'm well aware of the level of exhaustion from teaching day in and day out. It's overwhelming. That's why I can't imagine teaching without a collaborative team alongside me.
So in our planning process, there are a few tools we use. The principle of variability applies to teachers too, so each of us has the freedom to use this or other tools to help us with our designing of the curriculum. Still, these tools are the starting points for us. This first one helps us to determine the standards we would like to address, our priority standards. Of course, all of the standards matter, and there is the intent to teach all of them over the course of the school year. But we believe that in order to design our curriculum properly, the how we are getting there, we need to know the why. That's the reason, the destination, the where we are going in student learning. We adapted this doc from our ERWC colleagues over at Mayfair High School in Lakewood, California. As you can see, we've got 3 columns: high priority, what is essential and what we must get through; medium priority, what we would like to get through; and low priority, what we might hit along the way in addressing the high and medium priority standards. We considered all domains when selecting the standards, not just reading and writing. We made sure to prioritize for speaking and listening and language as well. At BOLSA, we came to consensus based on what we believed were the needs of our particular students and considered the ERWC modules that called out these particular standards. The conversation, while seemingly unappetizing upon first reaction, surprisingly offered us so much to talk about and reminded us that we need to be intentional in our decision-making process. After we came to consensus on our priority standards that we plan to address and the ERWC modules that can best support those priorities, we moved on to map them out with the year-long plan. This is simply the Google Doc version, although it definitely does not look simple, of the year-long graphic organizer presented in the ERWC introductory training. In the year-long plan, we lay out our plan and order, adding notes and general modifications that we agree upon. Yes, this is daunting, and while I admit ours has some gaps and content that we've since changed, the initial collaboration, the conversation that occurred in completing this document, is what really mattered.
And with this book module, we have even addressed one of the biggest challenges ELA teachers face: the challenge of getting reluctant readers to take on the daunting task of reading a classic novel like Brave New World. This is not a minor feat. In this age of distractibility with devices constantly vying for our attention, it is difficult to get people to read. But I'm hesitant to suggest that we should hold students captive and teach the heck out of the novel, taking the entire class time to read out loud to students for as long as it takes to read 259 pages. Doing the analysis for them because we assume that they just won't see it unless I show it to them. This, I fear, would be what Kelly Gallagher points out, that by over-teaching literature in our classrooms, we may be just as responsible in the read-aside epidemic that's going on. Maybe there's another way, another approach, and this is where the UDL principles come in. That of optimizing choice and autonomy optimizing relevance, value, and authenticity, and recognizing expectations, beliefs, and motivations. These all speak to giving students space to develop as readers, supporting them through their needs as readers, rather than simply lamenting about how below reading level they are when they come to us. This may be true by some metrics, but I'd rather spend my time meeting students where they are rather than where I believe they should be. I've got 10 months with them. I'm aiming to build a lifelong reader. Maybe I won't see immediate improvement, but hopefully I can give them some confidence and positive reading experiences during our time together. I've been inspired by Carol Jago's call to ELA teachers to set up and maintain a cohesive community of readers in the classroom. Of course, this isn't going to happen overnight, and it may not happen when introducing a challenging classic text like Brave New World. Now, a culture of readers needs nurturing by providing space and time in class for students to develop their reading process, with independent reading time embedded throughout the week, providing students easy access to texts of all kinds, of varying genre, of varying level of challenge, new and old books available for students to read.
We're trying something new this year. Inspired by Marcus Luther, teacher and co-host for the Broken Copier podcast, we created this doc to help students document their progress as writers and readers over the course of the year. Rather than monitor or try to motivate with book reports or quizzes, I find this to be a way to optimize challenge and support for students, as it is an opportunity for them to reflect on their own learning. The hope here is that students will not see it as more boxes to fill in, something that the teacher is going to evaluate them on, but rather their own journal of sorts, cataloging their experiences throughout the year, and something that they'll come back to at the end of the year. Let's start on the second page. Here, the student tracks their reading journey. It is where they can catalog what they've read over the course of the year, add book titles recommended by others. They write a brief summary of the reading experience for each book and rate the book with stars. This is for their reading process, and it's something I will redirect them to at the end of the year. Going back to the first page, a page right out of Mr. Luther's creation, students keep track of their writing journey, reflecting on how they feel about their process for that particular piece of writing, and to consider what they invested into this piece, giving them the chance to speak to their labor as student workers. This criteria of time and effort may not have much value in a results-driven culture, but for learners, for creators, I find that there needs to be room for self-reflection. Ultimately, I ask students to reflect on my feedback and offer their takeaway for each piece of writing. Seeing their responses, one after another, my hope is that they'll begin to see a pattern in their own writing and maybe develop an identity as a writer. This is the optimizing relevance, value, and authenticity of UDL that is at work. This writing that the students create, they're their creations, the students' own work. It's not mine to possess. I invite personal response to the self-reflection process. Otherwise, it won't feel relevant to the students. While I concede it is important to measure their reading and writing proficiency, we're finding that in order for us to maintain a UDL approach in our classes at my school, we need to consider how evaluation can create a barrier that impedes student learning.
Which brings me to my last soapbox topic, evaluation, the elephant in the room. We as an ERWC team here design formative and summative assessments together. With the UDL lens, we consider variability in design for student choice as much as possible and within the scope of our goals. But then there's that moment when we as teachers individually have to decide how those assessments get inputted into our grade books. Our teacher minds, as if by instinct, they quickly shift to a points-based system simply because that is what grading program allows for, and that's what we've known. It's the path of least resistance. It's interesting if you think about it, this logic of determining the number of points to assign to products in a writing classroom. Does it run counterproductive to the process? True. Grades can be a positive motivator, getting students to put in that extra effort to get an assignment finished. I guess it's the currency of the class. And yet, I've seen how it can have the opposite effect. I've seen the student enthusiasm for learning, the genuine interest in a particular topic, the motivation to take on a creative project of their choosing, get overshadowed by the anxiety of grades, of how much a particular assignment is going to affect their overall grade point average. I've seen students less willing to take risks as writers for fear that it will result in lower scores. That's not what I envisioned for my writing class. And I'm sure you've been on both sides of this power struggle, as teachers and as students. But look, I'm not suggesting that in implementing UDL, you need to revolutionize your gradebook. At the end of the day, it's our duty as evaluators to communicate to our stakeholders whether students are meeting the standard or not. I've noticed in my shift to a UDL mindset that I need to consider everything that impacts student learning and determine all possible barriers preventing student learning and figure out how to design my class so as to encourage curiosity. Again, I acknowledge that there are some things that are out of our control, but maybe we can consider reevaluating our approach to evaluation.
In fact, there's space for this. Consider the recommendation from the ERWC Steering Committee. There is so much choice available in which modules we select to teach and when we choose to teach them. But let's remember the bookends of the year, the portfolio modules. In our excitement to jump right into the curriculum, those excited issue-focused modules or concept-driven mini-modules, it's easy to lose sight of establishing the student portfolio. Really, for our team here, we found this to set the tone for the year. This emphasizes the writer, not the writing, less the product and more the process. We noticed that for many of the students, this was the first time they've been asked to think about themselves as readers and as writers. It puts the emphasis on students bringing together artifacts they've created over the course of the year and being metacognitive about them, asking them to think about their reading and writing processes. The self-portrait, their first piece for the portfolio, asked them to reflect on themselves as learners and users of language, not just writers, but also speakers, communicators. They're asked to consider questions such as, what obstacles have you encountered and perhaps overcome in learning to read or write? What are your most vivid memories of reading or writing? Your first storybook? What issues have arisen from learning a second language, being multilingual, speaking a non-standard dialect, having a speech or hearing impairment or a learning disability? What assignments had a particular impact on your reading and writing? What teachers or mentors have supported your development as a literate person? Have any events from your past made you the reader or writer you are today? These are just to name a few. At the end of the year, students will come back to this portfolio, not only a physical version, but their digital, and consider all the work they've completed. Along with this review is a self-reflection on their learning. It really is less about the products, but the learner and their journey over the 10 months. As mentioned earlier, we really hope to offer students meaningful learning opportunities. Students may view some as rewarding, while others not so much. That is all right. But their takeaway from it all is what they're learning about themselves as communicators. And perhaps they can see where they're going with their literacy.
This has everything to do with UDL, promoting reflection, enhancing capacity for monitoring their progress, and cultivating the belief that there are multiple ways of knowing and making meaning. Making the portfolio the thread that weaves together all the learning experiences in the year, we're emphasizing the importance of progress over time, but also putting agency back in the students' hands. As we move from one module to the next, at the start of each of those modules, our intention is to prepare the students for the upcoming learning. The kind of learning experiences that I, the teacher, hope to provide for the students. In the end, though, with the final reflection, the other portfolio bookend, we ask the students to reflect on themselves as learners and all they've experienced in the class over the 10 months. It's not the accumulation of points or percentages. Rather, it's an honest assessment, a self-assessment really, A look at the selection of work the student believes is an accurate representation of their learning. This puts the spotlight on the whole student as a learner, which is ultimately what UDL aims to achieve.
My team and I plan together in whatever way we can. It is difficult to meet in the same room regularly, so we find ways to maintain that collaborative spirit. Given the challenges of our busy schedules, documenting our ideas is critical for our planning for tomorrow's lessons, but it is also for our future selves. Of course, our use of Google Slides, the slide decks used to communicate our content of the weekly, also serve as a path to keep us as collaborators connected. But no team member is required to follow those slides to fidelity. They are a tool for us to make sense of the plan. Each of us has the creative freedom to meander on our own curricular path while still being adjacent. But from the start, it is important to maintain that connection to ERWC principles. Otherwise, it is easy to lose sight of the class's overarching goals that we had established at the start of the year. We came up with this document to help us to be mindful of the original module plan provided by ERWC while also keeping track of scaffolds, accommodations, or modifications to particular activities outlined in the original ERWC module plan. What I found important here is that it enables us to consider the assignment template. This is laid out throughout the document. It also helps us keep the ERWC arc in mind as we design our plan. As you can see, this document has a number of links to relevant documents. We have the UDL module planning doc we used for Into the Wild, the Brave New World reading calendar we've set for this year, the ERWC documents, teacher version and module overview. There's the 24-25 year-long plan, the document we prepared before the start of the school year. We have the spring calendar, again, another tool for our future selves to refer back to. There's the stasis theory slide deck, the previous mini module we taught, a link here with the intention to reinforce concepts from that mini module during the rollout of the Brave New World module. We also have our weekly slides from last year and this year. Here's the ERWC ARC. We even have the link to the High Impact Strategies Toolkit, anything that will offer inspiration for our design process. As you can see, in the left-hand column, we list the activities from the module that we would like to teach in class. But then, in the right-hand column, we write down all the scaffolds, accommodations, and modifications we would like to make when we teach those activities. Mind you, this document is not where we articulate the needs of our students. That happens during collaboration prior to the completion of this document. However, what we do here is apply that information in deciding on the learning goals and adjustments to the activities. For example, as I mentioned earlier, one aspect of student learning we have been more mindful of is reading resilience and endurance. But we have made a more concerted effort to de-emphasize that goal when assessing student comprehension of the novel Brave New World. Instead, we agreed that we will give students opportunity to practice reading the text closely on specific passages provided ahead of time, and then providing separate smaller assessments of that skill, untangling it from the ability to read the novel in its entirety at a high reading comprehension level. This, we believe, might impede students' ability to successfully respond to the culminating writing task at the end, that they had been expected to understand every detail of the novel seems to impede that. Overall, this tool, like the other collaborative docs and slides we use, serves to keep us connected and mindful of the resources ever at our fingertips, but often just out of mind as we make our way through our teaching.
So we plan together for the Brave New World module, and we try our best to anticipate the barriers impeding student learning that might occur. Some we may not see coming. That is the reality of teaching at the whirling speed of 100 miles an hour. But we adjust from lesson to lesson, week to week, trying to hold on to our goals that we outlined together in collaboration before. So let's talk about providing multiple means of engagement for this module. Here are some ideas that we came up with that we plan to include. 1, we want to give students choices for exploration, choosing themes to focus on, like the role of technology, freedom versus control, happiness versus truth. There are opportunities in the activities we modify to allow for different access points into the module given varying student interests. 2, we want to make sure there are different formats for accessing the ideas the book presents, like varying types of media, short videos, podcast episodes, visual artwork, all kinds of representation. The purpose here is to hook them in with something that is relevant and engaging. 3, we aim to find opportunities to bridge the ideas to the world that they live in and the experiences that they have. Soma and smartphones, anyone? The algorithm is real. 4, we also want to be intentional about the different ways to have students engage those big ideas in the novel, participating in various speaking activities, fishbowl discussions, give one, get one partnerships, stay and stray group shareouts, discussion board questions, role-playing scenarios. But most importantly, we want to make sure that we're building a culture that fosters belonging and support. It is easy to fall back into the traditional way of teaching a novel, one that focuses on making sure that the students read and often motivating through quizzes and other points deducting assignments. A gotcha. We hope that students feel welcome to each day's learning experience, irrespective of whether they were able to finish the assigned reading or not. Of course, we do voice the expectation that students do need to read and come prepared. But we do not want them to feel like they've dug a hole that they can't climb out of every time that they come to class. Instead, we hope that they will understand that there is something that they'll be able to gain from the day's lesson. That's the goal.
We try to keep things in perspective for this book module. We have specific goals based on our priority standards. We present the students with our goals for them for this module, and then have them set their own personal goals for reading, writing, speaking, and listening. For this to happen, we need to provide them with time within the school day to access and engage the text. This is where the building a community of readers that I mentioned earlier comes in. We have made independent reading a routine in our ERWC classrooms. The space and time for students to develop as readers. Before I can ask them to grapple with the challenging text like Brave New World, I need them to build that capacity to read for longer durations and to hang in there with text. They need to try this independently with text of their choice. Otherwise, we can expect fake reading of Brave New World behind the scenes. So we shift our schedule to 3 days of the week for instruction, the activities we designed from the module document for classroom activities, but the 2 other days in the week are reserved for independent study time. This is a routine that we build toward, preparing students by helping them consider their level of focus and the distractions in their lives. The issue module, Is Boredom Good for You?, really helped to develop their understanding and to consider the forces at work against their ability to maintain focus. It served as a good prelude to Brave New World. So at the start of each independent study time session, we ask students to set goals for the time. We offer a menu of options from which they can select. Included in those options is time to read or listen, to choose whichever medium best offers access to them to the novel. What's important here is that they are making deliberate choices related to their learning, and we give them that time in a quiet space to follow through with their learning choice. At the end of the period, we ask students to reflect on their progress as learners.
And then there's multiple means of representation. The what of learning. We know that since students absorb information differently, our plan is to present the novel and the novel's ideas in multiple ways. We plan to provide different formats for the text. We give them access to the audiobook, providing links to both American English and British English dialect narrators. Surprisingly, this can affect listening comprehension for English learners. We even share chapter summaries. This eliminates the shame, sometimes overt, often subtle, that exists at times in English classes around not finishing the assigned reading. This will give students an opportunity to review what they've read and determine the gaps in their learning. Remember, this comes back to our original goals with reading for this module. We offer access to the graphic novel version of Brave New World, created by artist Fred Fordham, which we've incorporated into our module goals and modifications of some module activities. Also, why not provide options to read the novel in their first language? I've had one of my English learners ask me if he can read the novel in Vietnamese. Of course. I reiterated to him my belief that reading in any language, even at first, requires reading a lot. I will never discourage that. This all comes back to each learner's individual goals set at the start of the year and reassessing those goals with every reading challenge they experience over the course of the year. And also, whenever possible, we offer tools that are more visually accessible. In the slides we project in class for our lessons and providing Google Classroom, the LMS we use here at Bolsa, we are intentional about making sure the text is large enough, clear enough, and not too much information is on any particular slide, potentially overwhelming learners. In our design, we are mindful of how we anticipate students will engage the information. We try to take a student's seat to see that perspective. This goes for all the platforms we use. We try to see it from the student's perspective, not just the teacher-creator's perspective. We also use graphic organizers, both digital and physical, to help students make sense of all the information we're covering. We even utilize other learning platforms like Pear Deck. One of the lessons we designed with Pear Deck introduced students to two tools we made available for this module: access to the graphic novel and a lesson on how to read a graphic novel. The latter was an example of the adjustment we made after we noticed that students weren't necessarily skilled at reading a graphic novel. That became a lesson. And it also became a new goal that we added for the module, having the students being able to identify what is the artist's purpose, both writer and graphic novel artist, as they construct the world of Brave New World. We realize that implementing too many different tools can be overwhelming for students. Too many choices when it comes to learning can result in no choice, in learner paralysis. So we understand that whatever tools we use to represent the content for Brave New World, we need to guide students through how to use those tools, but then allow for students to choose from those as they proceed with their learning. Ultimately, getting students to reflect about which tools assisted them and which scaffolds they believe may be impeding them from challenging themselves and growing as learners, that's the goal.
Now to the exciting part, the multiple means of action and expression, how the students can demonstrate their understanding. I say exciting because this has often been the part of the curriculum that English teachers have put their designing eyes on for modifications, at least the ELA teachers whom I have worked with. There's an excitement in designing a final project that will interest students and also meet the learning goals established from the start. Our eclectic ERWC PLC love to come up with unique ways of adapting the summative to reflect the needs of our current students or to meet the moment with a relevant medium. More than an essay, maybe a TikTok-like post? As hectic as the job is, that tendency to dust off the same old summative is not in our nature as collaborators. We have made a conscious decision to move away from one of the pillars of the traditional method of teaching the novel in ELA, that of having high-stakes tests in the form of midterm and final exam. We wanted to make sure we gave a lot more choice in how students could communicate their understanding of the novel, more than just through the academic essay. During the designing process, we always reconsider what the culminating task for the module should look like. In fact, we begin with the end in mind. We select what that culminating assessment would look like, even if it is a general vision, and we use this to drive our planning and adjusting of the module activities. The summative selecting process happens early on in the year when we plan for priority standards, the year long, looking over the kind of projects we have exposed students to. We also aim for a variety in modes and genre. We would like them to be exposed to a rich and diverse range of communication tasks, never just the academic essay. Perhaps our hand was forced with the inception of generative AI. We understand that if ChatGPT can easily crank it out, then maybe it's not worth assessing or assigning to students. The jury's still out on this. But we understand that it is our role to prepare students for the real-world communication of the 21st century, rather than something we vaguely recall from our days as college students. Gone are the "you're going to need to know how to do this for college" warnings. So what did that look like for this Brave New World module? Wait. Before I reveal the summative options, let me share first all the other ways we have designed for multiple means of action and expression throughout the module. Remember, demonstrating learning doesn't just happen at the end of the module. We use a variety of assessment strategies. The informal, low-stakes nature is key. There is the fever dream assignment. Admittedly designed in a frantic fever-like moment, we wanted to give students an opportunity to reflect on the first part of the novel, the world state. There is choice in which they can write a series of texts, send a voicemail, write a letter, or even make a public announcement to the class. The idea is to have students summarize what has happened so far in the novel, but to do so in an alternative to a quiz. We created a few collaborative table projects. One, the characterization lesson, centered on expert group, home group model, in which students were provided multiple opportunities to practice their understanding with peers in a group that shared the same character before returning to their home group to share out their understanding. The next step in this assessment was assigning each group a passage for one of the characters, not necessarily the one they were an expert on, and as a team, they had to apply the characterization analysis. We also wanted to bring speaking and listening standards to the forefront of assessment in our classes. Namely, Speaking and Listening 1, to initiate and participate effectively in a range of collaborative discussions, one-on-one, in groups, and teacher-led, with diverse partners. This, we believed, would give students multiple opportunities to develop this skill as well. With so much emphasis on the mode of writing in ELA classes, this we noticed needed attention. In lieu of reading quizzes, we created fishbowl discussion triads, groups of 3 working as a team in preparation for 3 separate discussions related to different parts of the novel. Throughout the process, students are working together to build understanding, but each student will be responsible for taking part in the inner circle of discussion at least once. This puts less pressure on performance and more emphasis on collaboration and building understanding. The check for understanding, while made visible during the discussion, is not the only opportunity in this assessment for students to demonstrate their understanding. The note taker and also the reflection post-discussion also give them a chance, thereby reducing the high-stakes nature of discussion performance. And now to the culminating task. Last year, we built on our re-emphasizing of Speaking and Listening 1 by modifying the essay task. If you notice Activity 25 in the module, you'll see there is choice, 2 writing options. And these writing tasks are engaging for sure. Centered on the core questions, have we become a trivial culture preoccupied with entertainment? And is social stability worth the price? These are interesting questions. We kept them as the guiding inquiry for the reading of this novel. What we added, however, were 2 more choices beyond the academic essay, the podcast and the video essay. These became projects that required additional scaffolding from us in order to ensure students were successful in the culminating task. But we were mindful to prepare students for the project through smaller activities throughout the year in order to develop those particular skills. Still, as you can see, we provide scaffolding along the way and reasonable dates for check-ins so as to ensure greater success. We also anticipate potential emergency points along the way, in which students or groups are not meeting the target check-ins and need a sort of cockpit ejection seat, an alternative that will still meet the learning goals from the unit. We are also willing to adjust the due dates so as to help students make responsible decisions in terms of their learning. This is putting emphasis on helping students develop their executive functioning. Ultimately, this comes back to what components of the culminating task gets assessed. One last step in this comes the individual reflection in the form of an interview of sorts. This assessment is individual but frames it in a real-world situation, one that calls on students to make decisions based on the rhetorical situation, the concept that we've been reinforcing throughout the year. We ask them to imagine that they are applying to Helmholtz Media Incorporated as an artist, and their purpose is to demonstrate their understanding of certain media, revealing their ability to transfer skills to new situations, and showcasing their skills by explaining their creative process in taking part in the creation of a podcast episode or any other option they selected for the Brave New World module. By asking each individual student to share their understanding of the process, what worked, and areas of improvement moving forward, we are removing the conundrum of group projects, who did most of the work, who didn't, and whether the project was fully completed even. The primary focus on the assessment is the creator and their understanding, and secondary is the product. I already see there's a lot of room for improvement in the design of the culminating task here. What this culminating task looks for the next time we teach Brave New World, I suspect will involve offering more choices and providing opportunity for students to even suggest alternatives to what the teacher offers. The goal by the end of the year is that all students will take on learner agency and make good decisions about what project they would like to pursue. The work of creating the parameters of what demonstrates meeting the learning target need not always be the responsibility of the teacher. In fact, UDL calls out that learner agency is critical in the classroom. What we can do as teachers is remain flexible and open to understanding what variability in learning can look like in our own classrooms.
Whew. We covered a lot today. I hope I haven't overwhelmed you. I think you'll be all right. I'm sure you'll be okay. Just remember, as you start your UDL journey in your ERWC class, just take it one step at a time. When we first started here with UDL, we didn't cover it all. We looked at the UDL guidelines, made sense of them as best we could, and we considered the little ways we can make our classrooms more accessible. It's all there. You probably noticed that many of these modifications we made are not revolutionary. They're not things that haven't been done before. You've probably implemented many of them yourself already. But now, maybe you can begin to see your teaching and your classroom through a UDL lens and design with students in mind, making it accessible for all students. Take care of yourselves, and I wish you best of luck on your UDL journey.